We call the meeting to order, please.
Trustee Peck,
Here.
Trustee Ruane,
Here.
Trustee Wajowski,
Here.
Trustee Benucci,
Here.
Trustee Lamb,
Here.
Trustee O'Rourke,
Here.
Mayor Collins.
Rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To appoint Trustee Benucci as this evening's chair.
So moved.
Motion's been made
Seconded.
and seconded. Trustee Peck,
Yes.
Trustee Ruane,
Yes.
Trustee Wajowski,
Yes.
Trustee Benucci,
Yes.
Trustee Lamb,
Yes.
Trustee O'Rourke.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. We're seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the special committee of the whole workshop held on January 30th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. Presidential comments?
The only comment I have tonight is to ask our local businesses to please take a better look around some of their buildings. Some of them are looking kind of ragged with a lot of garbage and debris. I'm not going to call anyone out from up here, but I think take the time to go out and look at your business, because that's really the face that you have in the community when people are coming in. So we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Trustees' comments?
Yes, I'm sorry, I have a comment. I think as I spoke in the past, I believe that part of the trustee's role is setting policy and direction, and I feel that a part of that is being able to have different items on the agenda. And I went back and kind of looked at our municipal code. I don't see anything written in there as far as a process or procedure for getting that accomplished. So I guess what I was wondering is if any of the trustees would support the idea of having, adding agenda items or placing agenda items as a future topic at one of our COW meetings.
Quick question, and maybe it's something staff can look at. Is it normal for cities and villages to actually have a municipal code that dissertates meeting norms and how city councilmen or trustees can request an agenda item? I mean, in my experience here, if I bring something up and there's consensus on the board to bring it forward, staff does their research and brings it forward if there's consensus on the board. So I guess maybe what's taking place is there's an item that maybe Trustee O'Rourke has asked for, and maybe it's come up, maybe it hasn't, but I guess if we can take a look and see what other communities do, I'm not sure if actually updating an ordinance is the answer. Maybe it is, I don't know. I'd like to see what
And
other
that's
communities
maybe
do.
what we could talk about at the COW. I'm just open for more discussion, that's all.
I'd like to see if that's the case. That's all. Thank you.
My experience on the board is such that these subjects get brought up, staff says they understand and they hear it. I think you're saying it doesn't show up on the agenda as quickly as you would like, but staff has looked at those things, and a number of things have showed up on the agenda
I didn't
when they
say
were
that.
ready for them, not just because we were prepared. So I guess from my point of view, the current procedure has worked fairly well, but I
So what-
understand your point. You're missing some things that you would like to see on the agenda.
That wasn't the point. No, the point was more about having a process, or formalizing, maybe is the better word, the process for having agenda items added. I don't know that we have one in place today.
Well, Mr. Murphy could comment, and the mayor, if he were here, would comment too, but I think the agenda, is my experience in the 11-some years, is put together by the administrator and the mayor. And they hear what we want, but they're the ones that control the agenda, at least is my understanding.
And you
I think
believe
it's
that's the
worth-
way it should continue?
I'm very comfortable with that, yeah.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
I'm comfortable with it, yeah.
Yeah, I guess with any panel or board, the chairman of that panel or board, whether it's, you know, in state or local government or county government, the chairman of that board controls the agenda for that caucus, is historically how I see it happen. Whether it's the county board, you'll have, you know, the majority, the leader on that county board control what goes on the agenda and what doesn't go on the agenda. That's what I see go on in other layers of government, as well as other city councils. But I'm interested to see though, like the point you brought up, if there is actually a code in other communities that we're aware of or that we can easily find that dissertates a process. I'm ambivalent whether we need a process or not, but I'm curious if it's done anywhere else.
I believe that's part of the purview is position of mayor, to set the agenda. I think it's a double-edged sword if you start putting into code what, when, how a trustee can approach things. I think you may hamstring further groups of people that are on the board or create more problems in the future. I guess if you don't like the way the mayor's doing it, then run for the position and then you'll get to make the agenda the way you like it.
Well,
So you think that's more of a fair way of doing it the way it currently works? And I'm not saying one trustee should necessarily have that control. I'm just saying, whether it's a consensus or whatever it might be, it just seems like, how do we as trustees then set direction or policy besides through a vote, if we can't control necessarily what would come forward for a vote?
And my recommendation, obviously without Mayor Collins here, and I can't speak for him, I think what we do, Ed, this has been, a long time situation that you brought up this concern for yourself, as a trustee, and that's fine. What I would do is, let's start with, we can bring that up again when Mayor Collins comes back, but I think also, you can also start with what, I would write out specifically how you would like to see it on an agenda. Whatever topic you want to see, write specifically the line item on the agenda. And then let's approach the mayor with that and say, this is the topic, this is my topic idea for a cow. Can we discuss it, like very clearly put out there, and then we'll go from there. I don't know how else to answer that without Mayor Collins here, but I think that would be a
Well, I guess I'm just
A
asking if there
clarification.
shouldn't be a little bit more formal process than
sure.
writing it on a sheet of paper and hoping the mayor likes the idea or doesn't like the idea, I guess is where I was going with it. And it's not necessarily about a specific topic tonight. It's really just about how the process works or what the policy is. Because I don't know that it's written, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it's written. I just know that's been the process, and
And you're happy with that?
so I am, because I usually can bring up what I don't think, but that doesn't mean I'm not open to hearing your side and what you want to talk about. That's what I'm saying. I think as far as getting on the agenda, I think if it's if it's specifically there, I don't know that it would be turned down. And if it was being turned down from your agenda item, then that would bring up a different issue. You know what I mean? From getting it to the mayor and having to talk about it.
I suppose your remedy is if you're bringing up an agenda item to the mayor and he's not listening to you, this is the opportunity here in trustee comments to speak your mind. And if you need to beat the drum repetitively, you will beat the drum repetitively. There are issues that I have that I think that should be done a certain way, and Mr. Murphy knows my thoughts on some things, and I will beat that drum every time I get the opportunity to. So, I mean, I think the current system we have is fair. It's part of the mayor's powers as in his position to set the agenda and to work with the administrator to lead the village and point it in a certain direction.
I think staff would also respond if there was a consensus. A trustee makes a suggestion, if everybody else chimes in and says, that's great, let's do it. I think the staff would respond very favorably to addressing that. If we all don't speak up, it may mean we don't support the agenda item or don't support a particular point of view. But I think we have an option of speaking up if we choose. We're not shy, none of us are particularly shy. Not Mr. Rain anymore, but
I'm very shy.
So I guess lastly, I'll ask Administrator Murphy, is there a formal process in place for agenda items?
As far as what the trustees bring forward,
Correct.
we don't have anything that's been codified. We don't have anything in writing. I'd be happy to do some research to see if there are other communities that have some type of codicil or some other type of approach to bringing those things forward. I have to tell you that in the years that I've been in local government and the towns where I've worked and have experience with, I'm not aware that anybody has a formal program in place as to what you speak to, but we'll be happy to do some homework on that.
Thank you.
Are there any other trustee comments?
Just a quick question for staff. obviously it's clear that, you know, the board as well as staff and the community support residents with disabilities as well as their families. And I do recall that we had one, possibly two different agenda items where we voted to provide use as far as housing goes. And I was curious if it was one or two different scenarios and how that project rolled out and came to fruition.
Yeah, I can lean toward John Prue to answer a little bit more detail, but if I remember correctly, there are 4 houses in town that provide services through Easter Seals and one other agency. And as well, I'd probably lean to Chief Conopec, but from what I understand, those neighborhoods haven't been at all impacted by those homes. But I'll ask Mr. Prue and Mr. Conopec, Chief Conopec, to add extra detail.
So Administrator Murphy's understanding is correct. The board has had recently, within the last, I would say 2 or 3 years, at least 2 special use requests. One was to convert an existing house on the north side of town, I think a little bit west of Coles, to a group home. And then the second request was for a new construction ranch house in the Creekside Crossing subdivision. I think in both instances, the homes have been integrated well into the subdivision. And to my knowledge, there have been no complaints or concerns relative to parking or any other fears, unfounded fears that were identified during kind of the public hearing process. So staff's understanding is that those operations have been
Yeah, I wasn't concerned about complaints at all from the community. I was actually more just curious on an update. How's it going? You know, how are the families, you know, responding that are able to, you know, visit with their family member that's actually living there, and just positive feedback. I haven't heard any complaints, nor did I expect any. So that's all. Thank you.
Are there any other trustee comments? If not, this would be the time for public comments. Come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Good evening, Council. My name is Frank Matthews. With the regards to what you had just brought up about agenda items, I'm just asking for a question of clarity. I'm just a normal, reasonable person, and from what you discussed, I'm kind of getting that it's the mayor's agenda. Does the public have any input, and what vehicle do we use? Do we use the mayor, or do we use a trustee if we want to put something on the agenda that affects the general constituents of Plainfield or the township? I mean, do you have an administrative code that
Well, I
indicates how you guys do this? Or
can't speak to what the township will do. I can only speak to what the village does. But as far as how we as a organization engage the community, there are a number of different venues, such as what you're doing tonight with speaking during public comments as well. We have a number of outreach efforts that go on throughout the year. We have a monthly Coffee with the Mayor meeting. We have a number of different public hearings and other events where we do a regular community-wide strategic planning effort and the like. So there are a number of different ways that we do go out into the community, both as staff and as trustees and the mayor, to get involved in the community and try to solicit input and the like. But I can tell you as well that all the trustees that are sitting here, and the mayor, if he were here tonight, he'd speak to it as well. They're always open to getting together with residents and hearing their input and getting their ideas. It's
it just didn't, it wasn't clear to me that as a constituent for you guys that we had any input directly to the council.
They have emails on the village website. You can email us anytime, and quite often
I
when
also looked at some of the different meetings you guys had, and some of the public comments are just hideous.
well,
No offense, but there's a lot of, I'm an ADA advocate, and some of the crap that has came out of some of these people's mouth, I'm truly ashamed that they have not been ostracized for the comments that there's HIPAA violations going on, there's ADA violations going on, and people are publishing this stuff. I don't think that we should be speaking up here. I mean, Are you guys condoning this, or is this policy that it's gonna be that people that come up here and they denigrate other people with disabilities? I think that's an issue that we really need to make sure that's on the agenda coming up in the
Well, to
fall.
go on your first point, quite often when people email us, if it's involving, say, a tree or it's a cracked curb, or we will contact the staff, notify the staff if they're not already aware. They usually fix it before it even makes it to public
Sure, I got
comments.
that, but I mean,
Public
in-
comments, so just like yourself,
officials
it's
up here.
it's a
I mean,
freedom.
I've seen it on the website, and I was just kind of appalled to see that a public person will come up here and denigrate or have some kind of comment that's somebody having a different disease or something like this. I think that there's issues like this that I'm sure that they're not qualified. I looked at some of the credentials that the person said these things. I just think that it's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Sir, I'm,
As
Yeah,
as you guys as trustees.
I don't know which moment you speak of, and I'd be happy to talk with you after the meeting and talk about those particular details. I do know, though, related to the issue that Trustee Peck brought up, that there were some residents who had some very passionate, although perhaps misunderstood feelings on how these homes work. And I know that at the time that the one that was coming into the existing home, the trustees did a very good job. In fact, help me out here. Why am I drawing a blank all of a
Dan.
sudden? Trustee Rippey. He's a very strong advocate for persons with special needs, and spoke directly to the audience on that particular issue. But I'd be happy to follow up with you after the meeting to talk about your specific concerns.
I mean,
And
can I just ask a basic question? So is there something specific you wanted on the agenda?
I'll bring it to one of the trustees, or I will talk to the mayor directly.
because, sir, I can,
it's-
I'm sorry, I just want to say one thing. I can assure you that the people on this board, past and present, are totally, good, decent people that would never denigrate anyone, and
But what my comment was that the person was a public person and they were denigrating.
you mean a
people with
public comment?
disabilities.
They were,
Yes.
yeah, well, when they come up at public comments, we tried to stop, but at some point, you're,
And I appreciate,
Yeah.
the due diligence that you have for that.
Yeah,
So,
what takes place is, I mean, there's a free speech issue. Obviously, I support, public comments, and sometimes individuals know that they can use public comments to voice their opinions, and they also know that there is essentially nothing that anybody can do if they misrepresent information, and there's no legal ramifications. So what this board, as well as many other boards, do is we listen, and if we disagree, sometimes we choose to say, you know what you've said tonight is not necessarily true, or sometimes we just completely ignore it and let them go on their way and not give them attention. And if any individual on the board were to cut somebody off in public comments, if they're within their time frame, even if they're saying something that's disparaging, completely untrue, there are ramifications then that we face by cutting off public comments. So essentially, they have the right to say things that are insensitive and untrue, and there's
And I
not
get
not
that.
much we can do about
and,
that.
I just would, I know we were all raised different and we're here to represent the people,
I agree.
so, and
Yes,
you
sir.
guys are doing a great job too.
Yeah, and one last point, you had mentioned townships. I won't speak for any township in particular, but as a whole, I believe every township in Illinois has a annual meeting that the residents actually host, and they set the agenda, and they can actually vote and legislate at that one annual meeting. So if there's a group of residents that are unhappy with actions that a township has taken, they can actually show up and completely override that particular matter and vote on it themselves as if they were members of the township board.
Okay, I just want people to have diligence and, just, we're all here on earth. And, I just don't, like I said, I'm an advocate for this, and
absolutely.
I won't stand for it, and I'll make sure that I speak up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Not, then we'll proceed with the workshop meeting First item on the agenda is community foundations.
Thank you. Tonight, I invited Mike Trench. He's to come in and speak with us. Mike is the executive director of the Community Foundation of Will County. He's been in that role for 6 years. Prior to that, he's done some other foundation and nonprofit work. He wisely got out of being in my chair about 20 years ago, and actually does some just fantastic work with the Community Foundation. So I wanted to introduce a little bit about what the Community Foundation does here in Will County, what community foundations are, and then as well to talk about the possibility of creating a community foundation that is Plainfield, if not centric, Plainfield oriented. Mr. Trench.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity for sharing a little bit more about the Community Foundation of Will County. And it was almost a couple of years ago, we did an on-the-table event here at Village Hall, kind of a community listening moment. And I threw out the idea of a community-based fund of some sort. And then probably almost a year ago, Brian and Mayor Collins and I had a chance to talk about it a little bit. Brian and I have done some follow-up, and so what we wanted to do tonight is to kind of share that dream out loud a little bit, and to give you some context in terms of what it is that we are thinking. By academic background, I'm a historian, and so let's go back to the Middle Ages for a moment. And a time where people very seldom moved more than 5 miles from where they were raised. And communities took care of people in their community. The miller would break a leg. The baker would burn himself. Somebody would pass away too young. And people in communities pooled those resources that they had in a community together. Oftentimes they were left in the custody of a local parish priest, but when those funds were needed for the benefit of the community, somebody could open up the chest, take out the funds they needed, and bring that back. And so it's that same kind of spirit that really goes into the formation of community foundations. Before there were taxes and before there were charitable deductions, people began doing charitable things. And if we go back just a little over 100 years to Cleveland, one of the most well-known individuals in Cleveland was a guy by the name of John D. Rockefeller, had a little extra cash, and so he set up a foundation. And the Rockefeller Foundation still exists and does good things. But people began to say, is philanthropy and charity just for the rich? What about all the rest of us? What would happen if we worked together and pooled our resources, small though they might be? Together, they could be something much greater. And so they began pooling resources, and it was an organization called the Community Chest from Monopoly. And they pooled together those resources, and those resources were used to provide the general operating support for those feeding the hungry, taking care of the homeless, just doing the charitable work in the community. One of the spouses of a board member of the Community Chest happened to be head of the Cleveland Trust, a banking firm. And a lot of people had left estates to the trust company. And he realized that in many cases, they were so broad that they had no idea what to do with them. And he said, we're bankers. We know how to invest. We have no idea what the needs of the community are. In other cases, they were so narrow, they couldn't be given away. And so he began talking about creating another entity, kind of as a partner to the Community Chest, that would have a little bit different philosophy. It would be a place, it's not like a checking account where the money comes in and out. It'd be more the savings account as a parallel organization. Build the resources. People could leave their estates there. And so the idea is that it would be something perpetual. It would grow. Earnings off those funds could be used for whatever a donor restricted it for, or whatever the needs in the community were. The difference was, There was already an organization taking care of operating support. So let's focus on the root causes. So the community chest, if they needed more cots in the homeless shelter, they would take care of that. The community foundation, as it became, decided to say, how can we keep people from becoming homeless? And who's going to work on the projects that will make those kinds of changes? So that's kind of some of the origins that happened with that. The community chest in the 1960s morphed into a different organization known today as the United Way. And so community foundations and United Way have been partner and companion organizations since their very beginning, a year apart, in the same town in Cleveland. A year later, people in Chicago said, you know, what they did in Cleveland, we need to do that here. And the people in Boston said, what they did in Cleveland and in Chicago, we need to do that here. And there are now over 780 community foundations throughout the United States. And those community foundations are usually organized around geography. There are some, there are 27 in Illinois. Some of them are focused on towns. The Barrington Community Foundation has a very narrow focus. Most of them are county-wide or multi-county wide. Some have changed. The old Morris Community Foundation is now the Community Foundation of Grundy County, so they've encompassed something greater. The Aurora Community Foundation is now the Community Foundation of the Fox River Valley. And so it was about 10 years ago that some community leaders got together and said, you know, Will County is the last geographic area in northern Illinois that does not have its own community foundation. And so we need to have one of those here. And so community leaders began working together with others in 2006 in partnership with the Chicago Community Trust to make that possible. And on the sheet kind of gave you some outlines, some statistics, but in our formation, early donors, early board members, there's a lot of names that I'm sure many of you would recognize. Ed Dollinger, Dennis Tonelli, Judy Avery, Brent Wadsworth, Larry Lorimore, Brother James Gaffney, the president at Lewis University, John Gruling, the Center for Economic Development, and Mike Hennessy, head of the United Way, and Bill Habiger. So there's a lot of names of people who have connections and links to the Plainfield area. We were originally incorporated as the Will County Community Foundation. And people were confused. They thought our funding came from government sources. They thought we were an entity of county government. I had a newly elected county board member called me up one time, started chewing me out for not applying for some kind of grant. Had to say, time out. You know, do you recognize who we are? Everybody always asked whether I worked for Larry Walsh. Nobody ever asked whether Larry worked for me. But so we got really creative, and we decided to just flip the name around, and we legally changed our name to the Community Foundation of Will County. And I think that that has done amazing things for us in terms of helping the community recognize who we are, that we are not an entity of county government, but that we are a private philanthropic entity. And we focus on philanthropy, which we define as a little different than charity. Charity takes care of the needs of an individual. Philanthropy can take care of the needs of a community. And we hope, very idealistic, but the hope is that if philanthropy does its job, it can someday make charity unnecessary. And that's a rather idealistic pursuit, but if we don't start some way, we're never going to get there. In the last 10 years, we have amassed about 3.5 million in assets, so we're just getting huge. Compared to the organization that we are a geographic affiliate of, Chicago Community Trust, they're about 3.5 billion. It's really only a vowel, but I guess it does make a difference. People get us confused all the time. But 3.5 million in assets. We have given out $1 million in community partner grants. We have created about 35 donor-advised funds with us that individuals and businesses have set up. And through their funds, they've given out another 700,000. So close to 1.8, 1.9 million of impact back into the community, while we've also paid our bills and we've done all that fundraising. And we've never had a fundraising gala. We don't have special events. That's not the way and not the kind of fundraising that we do. In addition to those, we have about 15 million in known estate commitments that will be received someday. 3 of those are from Plainfield residents, a little over $1 million. 4 of our donor advised funds are Plainfield residents. We have granted in the Plainfield area to the Interfaith Pantry an electric pallet jack, which allows them to just move stuff from storage to out front where they're distributing it in a much easier kind of way. But we have found along the way that one of the challenges of Will County is just simply the geography. It's a big place. And people in Plainfield and people in Wilmington and people in Bolingbrook and people in Beecher don't necessarily feel that they have an awful lot in common. And yet there is an extraordinary pride and generosity that is very community focused. The many municipalities that make up Will County have a great sense of generosity. And so we feel that that is one of the ways that we can serve the community. And so part of our vision is to tap into that unique nature of Will County with very independent municipal spirits of generosity and creating community funds. So what if there was a Plainfield Community Fund that the people of Plainfield could put money into that would be restricted and designated for doing good things to improve the quality of life in Plainfield alone? It could live under the auspices of our 501c3 without the necessity of doing a whole separate foundation and all of that complexity that comes with organizational structures in the public sector. I think one of the questions is, why is something like that important, and why would we talk about it now? The next 10 years, I think, are going to be very challenging times for the nonprofit sector. The most generous generation will be passing away. And people who have a strong history of being givers are going to be leaving their estates to the next generation that are a little more on the consumer side than the giving side. What's that going to mean for nonprofits as many of those folks go away? We also know that many nonprofits are funded by government sources. Any guess on which way government revenue for nonprofits is going to go in the next few years? Okay. Those who feel that it will be going up, we usually recommend therapy of some sort. We don't necessarily see that there's going to be a whole lot of change in those funding models. So the traditional streams of revenue that have supported nonprofit organizations are going to be declining. At the same time, every day, the IRS approves 125 to 150 brand new nonprofit organizations every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That increases competition because they're all looking for what? Okay? And so if there's a greater number of nonprofit organizations, decreases in revenue, there's going to be a crunch. And organizations are going to need to have alternate sources of revenue. And that's part of our role in the community, is to build those resources to make sure that they are there. We work with a lot of nonprofits. We encourage them to start building their reserve funds, start building endowment funds. It's like the retirement plan for your organization. If you think about starting it when you're 55, you're a little too late. And so talking to organizations about, if you want these reserve funds to be in place 15, 20 years from now, today is the time to start building those. We also know that Will County, the statistics, by the time we reach 2052, there will be $52 billion changing hands in the largest transfer of wealth that we've seen in our nation. So that's $52 billion just in Will County alone. And so if we could convince people to leave some of that money in the community that they value and cherish. Because most people are going to leave their estates to kids. And where do those kids now live? Philadelphia, Atlanta. They're outside of the area. And so resources that have helped make each community rich in its own way have the potential in the next generation to be leaving that community, unless there was a place and unless there was encouragement for them to leave those resources in the community. With $52 billion in play, if we asked people to leave 1% of all those resources and create a pool of $520 million at a 5% endowment payout, that's what? $26 million a year. If we had a new source of revenue that was producing $26 million a year to do good things in Will County, would that make a difference? So, is that a dream? Is that something that's possible? We're kind of back to where we began with the history, aren't we? Community helping community. So, I appreciate the time and the opportunity and the invitation, and I think to just kind of share the vision that, you know, a Plainfield Community Fund is something that could happen. And we'll try to hold probably some meetings in the community, gather some people together, talk about it some more, answer some questions, because we try to work in a way that is counter to the state of Illinois. We feel that you actually need to have money before you give it away, kind of a novel concept. And so it would require, you know, donations and support from the community along the way. And those are conversations that we would love to have with the folks here in Plainfield. Any comments, questions, snide remarks?
I have a question. There's a few foundations just around Plainfield here, different ones. How does this interact with that? Like, how would those foundations partner with this foundation? Would they be absorbed into it? How does that work?
I think that's one of the things that, you know, we would want to work out, and I think that's why we would want to have some of those community conversations. A community foundation, you don't want it to be subject to quasi-political use, to become a tool of some sort. And you don't want it to be just running off independent, doing its own thing. You know, we just recently had a meeting with a lot of us that do grant funding in this region. And we've talked about how we as funders need to be working in a lot more collaborative way. We have good conversations with the United Way. Things they're funding, organizations they're working with, so that we're not duplicating, so that we're not working at cross purposes. And so I think that, you know, whether something like that could be mandated, I certainly think it needs to be suggested, and that those kinds of entities that already exist need to all be working together in collaborative partnership.
Because there's there's two I can think of right off the top. The Riverfront Foundation, which supports our riverfront area here, and also I'm on the Foundation for Excellence for Plainfield District 202, which of course we all run into the same things. We're all trying to find that benefactor, as so to speak, instead of just trying to fundraise the money all the time. So what would the steps for, say, the Foundation for Excellence, what steps would we take? Would we contact you? Would we be speaking to a group? How does?
In order to get funds from
Well,
this
and
Plainfield
not just to
Community
get
Fund?
funds, but just to find out how to partner. How does this all work?
I think one of the possibilities that's coming up is each year we do a community partner grant. That's our grant program. It's an annual competitive grant program, and we do 2 awareness sessions in Will County prior to opening that, and we are doing the one in, I don't know what the date is right offhand, March 21, 23, something like that. But it's going to be held here.
Oh,
at
great, okay.
Village Hall in Plainfield.
Oh,
is one of
thank
them.
you.
So, you know, that would be a place for some of those nonprofits to come to find out, you know, how to get money from us, because that would be an important thing. And then if we were to create something like this, we would have to find out how do they take requests? You know, is this something that they would want to take applications? Is it something that you would just store it up and use it where there was a need? Who makes the decision on where those funds go? So there's a lot of things that would need to be factored out yet. But I think, you know, to work together, there should never be charitable work that's happening at cross purpose.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and to the point that as well, that the whole idea of working together is the very key comment to be said there. This isn't to be a competition to take over other existing funds and the like. If those systems are working, by no means is this thought of as a replacement to that, but rather as a possibility of there are things that the Community Foundation can do that the those foundations you mentioned either A, don't have the resources, or B, they don't have the mechanisms for it. Likewise, those agencies can do things that the Community Foundation might not necessarily be in place to be able to take care of. So there's a conversation to take place at a much greater detail and the like. Tonight was really an idea of introducing this concept to the board and getting a dialogue going at a much larger level and start introducing Mike here inside our community with some of those key players. You know who those folks are. You know who could be great champions for something like this. You know who could be a voice of a good sounding board, let's put it that way, of you know, questions and concerns, much like what you just raised up, Margie. So these are the things that we want to start having. These are the conversations that we think are worthwhile in having something like this go forward. And you know, we've got such a great asset and such a great resource here in Will County through the Community Foundation, and it would be I would be remiss if we didn't try to use those resources to continue advancing our community.
We've slowly been growing and getting around. We're a staff of 2, so we're small, and Will County is a big place, and so we're kind of working and getting to know a lot of the individual communities, and because we do things in a very relationship-based kind of way. We have a significant number of donors from Plainfield already, and as I mentioned before, the estate gifts. In fact, two of them will be providing some annual revenue to the Foundation for Excellence, which makes us your fundraiser for some of those local organizations as well. And we just recently, after I met with Brian again the last time, we finally decided to say, we need to just get a little more involved, and this will be the 3rd chamber that we are now a member of in Will County. So we're a brand new. We haven't attended anything yet, but we're a brand new member of the Plainfield Chamber. We belong to Bolingbrook, and we did feel we had to join Joliet as well, since that's where our offices are. So
one of the things
so
which is
you'll see us around more.
I look forward to that.
Just to the annoying point. Maybe.
one of the things that's the board has been working on for some period of time is to build community spirit. If you're familiar with Plainfield at all, there's a North Plainfield, a Central, and a South Plainfield. And it'd be nice if we were able to say we're all Plainfield. And we've been working towards that as part of the strategic plan and some other things. But that's an important part of making what you want to happen. I've been blessed, or however you want to look at it, went to a school that's very effective at collecting money from alumni. They have an incredible thing, but it's because there's a large pride of having gone there, and they feel they want to help reward that. If we can develop that spirit here in Plainfield, we can end up getting the same kind of thing. But you have to feel that it's worth contributing to, and we have a role to play in that, as do you and other things. But it's a work in progress. I'd like to see it make more progress as a board, but we're getting there, I think. We try to have activities that bring the community together, and one of the Irish Parade coming up in another couple weeks, or whatever. Plainfield Fest, Cruise Night. So there are things that make Plainfield a destination. I think those things will help create the kind of spirit that will allow people to feel, hey, I want to contribute to my hometown. You can't feel like you're a piece of a hometown in order to do that. You have to feel like you belong to the whole thing, and I think we have to make sure that happens, or do our best to make it happen.
I think that's why, to get as broad a community engagement as possible, both pro and con. People who like the idea and people who want to take shots at the idea, or whatever it might be. But the broader the ownership and putting something like a community fund together that meets all those kinds of needs of bringing together different geographies, even in a municipality, the more successful it's going to be, the broader that engagement is, and the broader the input. So, again, we've kind of been talking about this for close to 2 years now, and so we'll keep working on it. But it's going to take time, and things that are beneficial for the community, and to make sure they're done right, it's going to take time. So this isn't something we want to just kind of do overnight and put on the table and say, here it is, like it or not. But we would want to work with you to build it together.
Thank you for, your presentation tonight. I mean, I was sold to the moment you said historian. My home away from home is visiting museums on the other side of the pond. And I did appreciate as well the Rockefeller reference. Obviously, you had Rockefeller, Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan where, they spent their lives competing to make more money. And then as they aged and figured out they had more than they could ever spend, they had contests on who can give away more money and found education, libraries, and universities. And I believe J.P. Morgan was the only one that wasn't indicted for under some of the monopoly provisions they put in place, and that may have been because he loaned the U.S. Treasury a bunch of money when they were running out. But I really like this idea, and I think you're at the right place. A lot of us have different relationships with different people in the community, and I think we can work together and make this, happen. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
To be here, so good to broaden the conversation. If there's anything else, business cards are in the packet. There's a lot more information there about who we are, our newsletters, stories, and so on that you can read. Always reach out if you have questions. You can reach out to me directly. You can work through Brian or Mayor Collins, and we'll see where we go next.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and if you have any thoughts and suggestions on next steps and the like, as Mike mentioned, this is something we've been working on and kicking around for a little bit, and we're at a point, I think, where it's right for us to take this to a much larger audience and a larger stage, and with your input and suggestions on next steps, I'm certain that it will be successful. So any thoughts and ideas, don't need them tonight, but over the next couple of weeks, if you have some thoughts or ideas on next steps, I would be very much obliged to either share them with me or directly with Mike or with the mayor, however you feel comfortable. I would be very appreciative.
And you say in March they're having a
Yep, there's an event.
event
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, it's I think it's the morning one we're doing here. I think
Yeah.
the afternoon one
You
we're
can-
doing at Joliet Junior College.
Okay.
So I want
You
to
can
say
just share that with us.
8:30 to 9:30
And I want to say it's the 23rd. I think it's a Thursday, right?
Tuesday or Thursday. I think.
Yeah.
We're doing one on a Tuesday, one on a Thursday, one morning, one afternoon, one here, one in Joliet. So I don't know which is which. I just look at my calendar and figure out where to go.
Okay,
I'll be sure to let you guys know.
thank you, Brian.
But so if there's nonprofits that you think need to come and hear about our community partner grants and what it is that they do, we have funding available for health, human services, education. We do have Brent and Jane Wadsworth had set up an endowment with us that is kicking out about $5,000 a year for the arts, and so we do have some arts funding there as well. But
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Reminders?
February 20th, the village offices will be closed for President's Day. February 27th is the next Committee of the Whole workshop at 7 p.m. March 6th is the next village board meeting at 7 p.m. And happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
We're seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Thank you. That motion carries.